Hello everybody, I bet you didn't think you'd hear from me quite so soon after my last video, but here I am. Now just before we get going on, I bought a new bike and I love it. I just wanted to do a quick update on my last video, which was the follow-up to the best value bikes with Shimano 105. Since making this video, the follow-up video, it's come to my attention that the winner of not only the all-round road race bike, but of the whole thing, the Scultura Rim 400 from Merida, may be telling a few porky pies. And I've put it under investigation for weight doping. Yep, sadly it does look like maybe the website that shows it as weighing 8.16 kilograms might not be fully accurate. If you're interested in seeing the discussion, check out the follow-up video. I'll put a link to it down below, and check out the comments where people are talking about how much this bike probably does weigh. So, back on May the 31st, 2018, I published a video called I'm thinking about getting a new road bike, and in that video I discussed my current bike at the time, my Specialized Tarmac SL4 Elite, and it was that bike that I bought to replace my rather beaten up old Scott Speedster that I think I'd had for about 4 years. So as I mentioned in that original I'm buying a new bike video, that Tarmac served me well. I rode it in TTs, I packed it up and rode it across Spain 2 or 3 times. I rode 320 miles in one go. I got it really dirty. I took it for a swim, and I also did Paris-Roubaix on it. As you can see here, I double wrapped the handlebar tape thinking that that would save me from the cobbles. As you can probably imagine, it did absolutely nothing. And by the time I'd finished that sportif, my poor bike was making more creaking noises than a pirate ship. And as I'm sure you're all well aware, a bike that makes creaking noises makes you absolutely bananas. Now that Paris-Roubaix was in April 2018, and I made this video in May 2018. Now as it turned out, and part of the reason I never made a follow-up video, is that I didn't actually buy a new bike at that point. I went through this bike and sorted out all the creaks and cracks. The wheel bearings had to be changed, the pedals needed changing. I think I may have had to get the head bearing changed as well, and I think the crankset had come loose too. When all that was sorted out, this bike ran fine again, and it lasted me for another year, at which point it came to my attention that a friend of mine had actually won one of these, a Cervelo S3 Ultegra mechanical. Now this photograph here is of a size 54, but the one he had was a 56, and he already had a pretty decent Canyonair road, so he just chucked this in the shed. Until I said, have you still got that Cervelo S3? So on the 14th of April 2019, pretty much a year after I did the Paris-Roubaix sportif, I bought this bike off my friend, and I very much liked the bike. It did feel like a definite step up from the SL4 Tarmac. It felt very quick. The only downside I thought of at the time was it seemed very heavy. It was well over 8 kilos. Now I would love to say that that was the end of this story and that I was still riding this bike happily. But as you know, things are never quite that simple with bikes, and there is a bit more to this story. But on the 24th of August 2019, I bought one of these. Cube Attain Race Tiagra, pretty heavy, 9.6 kilograms, and this was to become my winter bike, and in fact still is my winter bike. My only real complaint of this bike was when I bought it, it had cable disc brakes on it, which I upgraded to the Tiagra hydraulic brakes, and it was pretty expensive to do that. I should have just bought the model above this one, but hey ho. So back to the Cervelo. As you do when you get a new bike, you want to start upgrading it, and unfortunately this is the best photo I have, but this is my Cervelo S3 at the pinnacle of its updates. I basically put it on a diet. As you can see, I put a pair of Hunt CAD 50 wheels on. That saved a good chunk of weight. I also put on an Edco Monoblock cassette, which saved something like 70 grams, I think. Crazy expensive, but it saved a bit of weight. I put on an Extralite Hyperstem, and that weighed about 82 grams, I think. Crazy light. And then I also put on a pair of Fizik, and I don't know how to say that word, Cyrano 00 bars, carbon bars, and they're super light as well. I think they're 172 grams, something like that. And I don't remember actually properly weighing it, but I definitely got it down below 8 kilos. And on the whole, I could not have been any happier with this bike. I loved the look of it. It was super fast, and I loved riding it. The only possible thing I would have complained about was riding it uphill. It seemed a bit dead. Other bikes I've ridden have felt more sprightly uphill, and I don't think it was just to do with the weight. There was something about this bike that made it feel slightly dead going uphill. So early March 2020, I went on a training camp with my local race team to Tenerife, and obviously took the Cervelo with me. And this is where things started going wrong for me and the Cervelo S3. On 2 occasions, both doing well over 40 miles an hour, once on the flat with a solid tailwind, And once coming down Mount Tady, I suffered probably what are the most terrifying 2 moments of my life, actually. Yeah, I think that's fair to say that. Well, other than when I broke my arm mountain biking, that's a whole other story. Basically, the Cervelo went into a speed wobble. And the best example I found of this on YouTube is this one here from somebody called D. Bozak. Hopefully he won't mind me just showing this little clip here. I did write in his comments and asked him if I could use this, but haven't heard yet. I'll put a link to this video down below, but this is almost exactly what happened to me on 2 occasions on Tenerife, and I'll just play it from here. You're going along quite happily, and then suddenly, boom, the bike starts oscillating, and you basically beep your pants. It is very nerve-wracking. So after those 2 moments, I spent the rest of the week in Tenerife riding around on my own like an old granny, because I'd totally lost confidence in the Cervelo, and Tenerife with the strong winds and a lot of fast downhills, you really do need to be confident of your bike. So pretty much from that moment on, I vowed that I would be getting rid of the Cervelo and started thinking about what bike I should get next. In the meantime, something I tried was I put the hunt wheels on the Cube. And obviously I haven't in this photo, but I also transferred the light stem and the carbon handlebars. And I thought that made the Cube look pretty mean. Sort of looks like a muscle car, except a bike, if you know what I mean. Now, guess what? Coming down a steep hill near where I live, at the bottom there's a bridge. And as I went over the bridge, on the Cube, there was some wind gusting from the side, and the Cube went into a speed wobble. Could you believe it? Now, if you research speed wobbles, there's all sorts of different explanations. Everything from stiffness around here to rider position, how stiff or relaxed the rider is. There's a lot of different variables at play. But one thing I did try was I contacted Hunt, and they very kindly swapped my 50mm front for a 30mm front, and I just thought maybe that would catch the wind less. And I put everything back on the Cervelo with the new 30 wheel and gave that a go. And though I never had another speed wobble, I never felt confident on that bike again. And I was on a pretty hard ride one Sunday with a very fast descent and lost the group because I just didn't have the confidence to go down the hill as fast as them. And it was at that point I thought, right, that's it, time to get a new bike. And here it is turning up, my new bike, in literally the biggest box I've ever seen in my life. And I live in a flat. I managed to get it up the first flight of stairs, and then the box was so big it wouldn't go under the ceiling. So I had to open it up and dismantle the box on the landing. And so, for all those people in the comments who have been asking me for the last 2 years whether I bought a new bike, the wait is over. Here it is, 3, 2, 1, ta-da! I bought a Scott Addict RC30. And I took a bit of a risk this time. I went for a 54. Usually I would ride a 56, but when I checked the sizing charts, I fell bang in the middle of the 54 and the 56. So I thought, well, let's give the 54 a go, because it will be a little bit lighter. So this is the bike, completely stock, and it comes in just under 8 kilos. And I took her out like that for one ride just to see how I felt about it, but it was pretty apparent quite quickly that these wheels are pretty heavy, and these big fat 28mm tyres that came on it are quite sluggish, or I found them quite sluggish. So I made a few modifications, not to mention that I found that brown saddle a little bit off-putting. That definitely had to go. So just before I show you the final result, I thought it would be quite funny to show you this. This is my little flat. I don't have much room to set up a photo shoot, and to get the whole bike in the frame with white behind it, best idea I came up with was hanging it from the back wheel from the beam in my flat and then turning it around in Photoshop. And here it is, the result of that photo shoot, and you can see the modifications that I've made to it. So first up, I've obviously put the Hunts on, and as you can see I've got my 30mm on the front, 50 on the back. I've got tubeless GP5000s on, which are basically my favourite tyre. I've swapped the saddle for a Bontreger Montrose Pro, I think that is. Yep, Montrose Pro, and that's the saddle I've been using for years now. And so far I've only dropped the stem down 1 spacer. There is a reason for that, because I probably would like to try it further down, probably not completely slammed. But I took out the steerer plug to see how deep down the steerer tube it goes, and it doesn't actually go that far down. And in fact, I'm not even sure I should have it 1 spacer down, because I think the plug's only down to about here. So really I need to get this cut off to then go down another spacer. But what with COVID and everything, it's been very difficult to get into the bike shops. So for the time being I've left it, which means that I can't put the cover over because it doesn't fit. The other thing that intrigues me is the bars are slightly aero on the top. So they're aluminium bars, and then the top has been sort of squashed down to make it more aero. Now in my mind you want that parallel to the ground, that aeroness there. Now if I do that, as you can see here, bar then starts to point back up a bit. It's almost like it's over rotated. So if you set this part of the bar in the position you would expect, which would be slightly anti-clocked, then the aero part of the bar doesn't seem to be parallel to the ground. But actually, with the bars pointing up a little bit at the back there, that actually feels quite nice. So I've left it for the time being. I like to have my shifters set quite low down so that I can get my wrist in there and ride on the hoods with my forearms quite flat to the ground. Probably riding aero is probably the strongest part of my riding, so that's how I like to have that set up, with the saddle slightly tilted down. So if we compare that to the stock bike, you can see the difference there. I'm pretty happy with my modifications. I think it makes it look better, and I absolutely love riding this bike. And if you compare it to the Cervelo, not quite like for like, because this photo is a 54, I had a 56. These numbers here are the geometry for the 56. But you can see that the Scott has 1 degree slightly slacker head angle, reach about the same if you look at the 56, and the stack is a fair bit lower on the Scott, but I've actually got some spacers in, so probably about the same. But I suspect the numbers that make the big difference are the Scott has a longer wheelbase, it's got longer chainstays, and it's got a slightly lower bottom bracket. And all in all, that makes the bike feel a lot more stable, especially going downhill. And that's what I was looking for. And to be honest, I find this bike pretty much as fast on the flat, and I definitely find it faster uphill. So it's win-win for me. And then more stable going downhill, so that's exactly what I wanted. So there's some neat little things about this bike. Obviously you've got the hidden cables, that's your view looking down. Yeah, I like to have my shifters turned in a little bit more aero. The rear axle looks completely conventional, but what you can do is pull it out and it'll undo both axles, and it will also tighten up the stem. And it also means if you want to go full aero, you can actually just take that off and not have it sitting in the wind. Another neat little feature is that the bolts holding the brake on are hidden behind this little magnetic cover that you just pop off like that, which is quite neat. On the downside, to change that horrible brown saddle, it wasn't as straightforward as I hoped. I had to buy a new clamp, and that was quite a specific part that I had to speak to the people I bought the bike off to find out A, why I couldn't fit my saddle, and then B, where to get this new part. And I think by the time I had it delivered, it was about 30 quid, I think. I mentioned the slightly grey area about how far you can drop the handlebars without cutting the steerer because of the plug, and I think that's a bit dodgy because most people don't know anything about steerer plugs and will just drop it straight down, and then that can be quite dangerous. The other thing that slightly annoys me is that you can see this gap underneath the spacers here, which sort of gives the game away a little bit. That's just a little thing, just slightly annoys me. And then nothing to do with the bike, but I bought a brand new Ultegra Stages power meter for it, which is on the crank. And it must just be the way that I ride a bike, but my cranks always get the paint rubbed off them, which is really annoying when you've spent all that money on that. But there we go. That is my current bike, and I'm extremely happy with it, which is good because I have about 3 years left to pay it off. So it ain't going nowhere. And on that bombshell, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Until next time.